This week, I'm joined by the incredible Amy Kellow, second-generation classical Pilates teacher and founder of Everybody Pilates. Amy's built a global studio brand, a powerful education program, and she's here to share what classical Pilates really means, the truth about scaling, and why staying rooted in the work matters more than ever. Let's dive in. Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this week.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so interested to talk to you about your story around Everybody Pilates and your education work that you're doing. But I'd love to go back to the beginning. When did you first discover Pilates? What was going on for you in your life at that point?
Okay, so I just finished university. I'd spent a lot of time in my teens playing sports, hockey team, netball, lacrosse, and I was just going to the local gym and found a Pilates class, just tried it out. And after a few months, realized that the back pain that I'd always had was not there anymore. It was kind of a bit of a discovery for me, realizing at that age that perhaps back pain wasn't normal. I'd always had back pain since I was, a teenager, and discovering a form of exercise that kind of helped my back pain was kind of revolutionary, really. I continued doing it, and then sort of my partner turned around and said, stop talking about it so much and go and train to do it.
So how old were you at that point?
22.
Okay, so yeah, you got into it quite young then.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was just through personal practice, going to classes, feeling something in our body, which I think is the same for a lot of people. I think people go and discover something about Pilates and discover something new about their body, how it makes them feel. And I guess the same kind of route for me.
And where did you do your first training?
So I did a level 3 mat work course qualification, a basic course that just got me started teaching.
And what took you on from there? So you did your course. Did you start teaching straight away? Where did you teach?
Yeah, absolutely. I taught in a local leisure centre one evening a week, and I started some of my own classes in, the village hall, that type of scenario.
Because when was this? What year would this be about? I feel like this is when Pilates was still pretty new in this country. Not many
Wow.
people were knowing about it.
It was 20 years ago. It must have
Yeah.
been 2025. No, 2025, that's dance now. 20 years ago, 2005, when I first started doing my mat work training.
I think this was the same as me. And it felt like there was a bit of Pilates in, like you said, in leisure centres and in gyms. I think Pilates studios were still just about maybe starting to pop up, but certainly nothing like today. So you went working in leisure centres, and then what kind of took you on from there to where you are now?
So I did my research and I wanted to look at the equipment training. So my next kind of step was to look at getting trained on the equipment. And it wasn't just reformer back then. It was like you got trained in the whole system. And I wanted to look at the classical system. And my thinking at the time was I want to learn what it is that Joseph Pilates created, and then I can go and do whatever I want to from there.
And what took you from there to doing a studio then?
I was asked to become a teacher trainer for the company that I trained with. And they led me down kind of the options of, well, really, you need to have your own studio. And I followed their lead, really. I gained some kind of insight from them and set up Everybody Pilates. And we've set that up. I think the studio opened in 2009.
Okay. And so when you went and did your classical training, full equipment, the full system, was that quite eye-opening compared to what you'd done as your little mat course at the beginning?
So I remember it vividly. I remember being on the course day one, and I was the person that couldn't do the roll up. I couldn't straighten my legs. I couldn't do all of these kind of exercises that were deemed beginner exercises. And I sort of had a panic going, well, my customers aren't going to be able to do this. If I can't do it, this is going to be way too hard for them. This is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? The classical work is too hard. And yeah, it was a real challenge for me that first weekend in terms of like, am I doing the right course? Am I going in the right direction? But I kind of sort of said to myself, well, I'll carry on teaching my classes the way I've always taught them. And then I'll teach one class, classical, and then I can make a comparison and see what happens. And I think within 6 weeks, that class was stronger than the people I'd been teaching for sort of 2 or 3 years. So I kind of went, oh, okay, maybe there is something in this. Maybe I have found something a system that is going to provide a little bit of strength and structure to the way that I teach.
Could you explain to me what classical Pilates is? I sometimes think these days that term is getting used a little bit incorrectly as anything that isn't fitnessy, more based Pilates. So I sometimes go to studios and they're like, we're not classical Pilates, we're whatever it is, lots of lunges and HIIT and stuff on the reformer. And I just think it's really important that people actually understand what classical Pilates is. I'd love to hear from you. You're a second generation teacher. We'll talk about that in more detail. But what do you understand classical Pilates to be?
So classical Pilates for me is the system of Pilates that was created by Joseph Pilates, passed down through us from the elders. So particularly for me, Jay, but also have a strong influence from Romana training through the original training that I've experienced and the teachers that I continue to train with. Classical Pilates is essentially the mat work, the reformer in a set order, and then the rest of the system being used to strengthen and structure the body, understanding how it all links together as a system. But it's also how it's very difficult, isn't it? It's also how it's taught. There is an element of understanding the connections and the feeling in your body. And this is something that has been instilled in me. It's the feel of the exercises, it's the depth of the exercises. It's not just that order, it's how you structure it and how it feels in your body and how you would get the most out of every single exercise.
So do you always teach it in an order?
So the reformer and the mat is always taught in the order that Joseph Pilates created. The Cadillac, the towers, the chairs, and the barrels are seen as your go-to exercises to work on tight hips or tight backs or to strengthen abdominals or to challenge yourself or to improve your push-ups type scenario. The mat work and the reformer are always kind of structured into, well, these are your beginner style exercises. These are more intermediate. This is more advanced. So you progress through. So a beginner reformer is not going to be the full reformer order. It's going to be those exercises that are relevant for the beginner, but in that order still. Joseph Pilates in his studio, he had pictures, photographs of all of the exercises on his walls. And Jay would say that you would go in and you would follow the pictures, you'd follow your order. If you didn't know the exercise, you'd skip it and you'd go on to the next exercise. So you can kind of see, if there was a really hard exercise like the snake and twist and you hadn't been taught it and you didn't know it, then you didn't do it and you moved on to the next exercise.
I love hearing you talk about that kind of the feeling of the exercises. And that's a bit maybe I didn't really understand because I knew about the order. And whenever I've sort of taught more of a classical class, it does feel pacier than I teach naturally. And it has, an order. A big part of my teaching is getting people to just feel this work. And I think this is the piece sometimes that's really missing from people not knowing the full system and not knowing Joseph Pilates, not reading his book, not understanding his work, is that he was about health and well-being, and exercise just played a part in that. So I guess there's a real skill then in bringing in that depth to something that is a bit more pacey in places. I'm interested to hear how you, like you said, the skill of the teacher is as it is in all Pilates, but is really important.
I'm not sure if classical Pilates is pacey. Not compared to what's happening, at the moment.
That's a good point, actually.
Yes. So I'm not sure that we can actually say that classical Pilates is pacey. You go with the flow of your class and of the people that are in front of you. I think we have to remember that. There is this kind of concept that classical is boom, 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 do the exercises and that. But actually, we're still teaching. We're still layering in those teaching techniques. We're still modifying for the person in front of us. We're still, allowing ourselves as teachers time to actually teach and to get the most out of the exercise for the people in front of us. So I would say the element of flow is quite important in classical Pilates, that we flow through the system, we flow through the exercises. Pace isn't something that I would kind of describe it as. I think that flow comes with connections. So when people are really in depth in their connections and they understand the movements and they understand where they're moving from, then that flow naturally happens by itself.
That makes sense. As someone who's been in the industry a long time, how do you then see where things like contemporary Pilates comes and fits into that, and where it's gone since, really? Clinical Pilates, fitness Pilates, there's lots of kind of terms, and there's no kind of clear definition on what some of this stuff is. So I'm just interested on your take on that. I get confused sometimes. I think, everyone has a slightly different opinion of what these things mean.
It's a challenge at the moment, isn't it? Because we've got classical Pilates, which is the foundation. It should be the foundation for all of us, really. Joseph Pilates' work should be that foundation. And I believe that everybody should understand where that foundation has come from in order to take your work beyond it as such. Now, there are a lot of classical people that are now going down the line of sort of talking about Joseph Pilates' work should only be referred to as contrology in the essence. And they're kind of, they're the people that are really shouting about trying to keep it as close to the source as possible, all those phrases that we hear. But actually contrology in itself is becoming a term used because of marketing. And, balanced body bringing out a contrology range, of course, people are going to start using that term more because it's being put into the market. In terms of like classical Pilates and contemporary Pilates, clinical Pilates, and it is just my opinion, of course, that if you train in classical, you have the ability to then go into contemporary and understand what you're teaching, and you can teach, whatever variation of the exercise that you want to, or you can go down the clinical route and you can teach a more modified version targeting specific muscles. And I think the gap between the two is actually smaller than most people think. But in terms of our perception, it's huge.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think it's a topic that's come up with a few people who run education programs, where they feel very passionate about, you have to understand where this comes from. And even if you're teaching some of the more fun stuff, you have to understand where this stuff comes from, and then you can teach it well, as opposed to just showcasing some choreography without any basis to it. I think for me, what it changed in my life was it educated my body. Like you, I came into Pilates quite young. I'd also had a lot of pain in my teens, very similar, and very much just kind of was like, well, this is it, because I'd seen lots of specialists, all the people who seemingly should know how to get rid of this. And it was a bit like, well, this is how you are. And like you, I discovered Pilates and I was like, wow, this is like totally transformed my pain. I was calmer. I stopped fighting my body. I, appreciated what my body could do in a way that nothing else had ever done for me. And I'm really passionate about that's the feeling I want people to have. And depending on where you are on a scale of your, not just fitness levels, but your body's level of what's going on. I found that interesting for you to explain that. How you would teach one person is different to how you would teach another person, even within a set system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to remember that. One of my instructors that I teach actually is a trauma physiotherapist, and to listen to her talk about the nervous system and how we co-regulate with our customers and how we kind of work with them really explains a lot of like how one session is very different to another for different people. You can be stood there teaching exactly the same order, but actually what that person is getting from it in that session is very different. And it's different in terms of how that customer perceives the exercises or feels them. And it's different in terms of how we teach them in terms of our energy, our touch, our communication, our empathy, all of those things. And it can be so, so different. And that's why, teaching never gets boring. You've got those elements of that growth within every session.
And you talked about working with Jay Grimes and learning under him. But explain to people about Jay, and how did you get into that work with him?
So I met Jay in London when he was on a workshop at New York Pilates in London with Daphne. She often brought him over for workshops in her studio, and I happened to go up and take a workshop. Now, I will say that I was very naive when I went to take that workshop, because I left his workshop and I went to somebody else's because I felt like I wasn't getting anything from it. And, after 5 years of then continuing to work with him, I suddenly sat back and went, oh, I wasn't ready to see what he had at that time, and I wasn't ready to receive what he was sharing. So something in my gut after I walked out of this workshop and gone to somebody else. A couple of weeks later, I saw that they were advertising the work at Vintage Pilates in Los Angeles, and that these programs were going to come up to study with him. And just something in my gut sort of said, I need to go and apply, and I need to kind of figure out what this is. I need to go and experience it. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into.
Always the best way, I think.
Yeah, I'd walked out of this person's workshop, I've walked out and kind of not wanted to spend any time with him, to then wanting to spend all my time learning from Jay. It was a very humbling experience. I think Jay taught me a lot about, not just Pilates, but how to be intuitive, how to listen to your customers, not just listen in terms of what their body was doing, but to give them space to be them. And he was just an extraordinary person to be with. His energy was special. And I think, that time, if I look back, it was hard work. It was inspiring. It was, you wanted to do your best for Jay. And you wanted to make sure that you were represented what he wanted to represent.
Did he have any good stories about Joseph
Oh, of course.
that you can share?
I don't know. I've probably got a book with them all written down
You should,
somewhere.
yeah. I feel like someone needs to write a book of just all the stories about Joe. Any that come to mind?
Just, he said that he'd go into the studio and, he'd think he didn't know, Jay didn't know that he was being prepared to be a teacher. So often he said that in that apprentice environment, he was just going in to do his Pilates and to get, injury free and to get back to dancing. And he said that, he'd go in and he'd do his mat work, and then he'd get up to leave. And then Joseph Pilates would be like, nope, now you do your spine corrector. And he'd get up to leave and he'd be like, no, now you do your reformer. And you get up to leave and he'd be like, no, now you do your wonder chair. So he would spend as much time in Joseph Pilates' studio as Joseph Pilates wanted him to be. And then it'd be, now you come back tomorrow and you do it again. And he would talk about, being told to go and push somebody and give them a stretch, and to go around the studio and to start to work with people, which again, Jay didn't know that he was being trained to teach Pilates. He just thought that was what happened in the studio. But yeah, and he said Clara was lovely. And he actually said that Clara taught him a lot about like the hands-on techniques and kind of the sports supporting and spotting people.
And then you work with Romana as well, is that right?
No, so I haven't worked with Romana, but I do work with Mijo Wiggins, who was one of Romana's teacher trainers. So Mijo has a great depth of knowledge with Romana. She's amazing to work with as well.
Is that approach, does it feel different? Does it feel just a version of, when you think of the different elders and what they brought to this work?
I think it's the person, I think it's their own influence on the work. I would say Mijo is very strongly aligned with, this is what Romana taught me, and this is what I'm going to teach you. And that's what you get from Mijo, and that's why we love it. But Mijo's energy is, another level. She's so energetic in her teaching and her personality that's the style of kind of session that you're going to get. That's the kind of energy that you're going to get in the work. And Jay was much more thoughtful and relaxed and kind of let the energy be in the room rather than being with himself, and all those sorts of things. So I really think the same content, absolutely the same content, the same system, the same work, just the energy of two different individuals makes it feel different. And I think that's what we have to remember, is that we're all different and we're all going to bring our experiences to Pilates, and we're going to teach it that way.
And how has this, your experiences and the experiences with the people you've worked with, how has it shaped your teaching style?
I would say, actually, to begin with, when we started rolling out our education, I was very much along the lines of, this is how you do it. This is the order. We're going to do this. You don't deviate. You don't kind of do anything different. In order to pass your certificate, this is the way it's going to be. When I started working with Jay, it was a lot more about being intuitive, learning and listening to the body in front of you and looking at what the body might do whilst doing an exercise, using your intuition to guide you. And so I went from being very, very structured and kind of over the top, I think, in one way, but then I went too far the other way and went too much intuition and kind of letting it flow. So we've kind of combined the two and met in the middle. So we have this great structure and great kind of format to our education, but we let people explore their intuition. We let them kind of listen to themselves when they're teaching, and be able to explore that. I would say like our education needs to be fun. It needs to be in a place where people feel comfortable. We encourage conversations around, contemporary classical. What is it? What's the difference? I have a lot of people who are bridging from contemporary to classical at the moment, and they've got wealth of experience. Some of them have got many, many more years teaching experience than me. But to have those conversations of, what has their training been like and what is the classical like from that I've learned from Jay and from me, Joe. It's fascinating because we all learn from each other that way, and we all can kind of pick up our favorite bits of variations and use them in our training. But I would say that above all, we try and provide like a really supportive environment for our trainees, because we want them to be successful. I don't want them to walk away from a training course feeling like they haven't got access to enough information, or they're confused, or they don't know what direction to go in, or that they've chosen the wrong course. I like to, probably a little bit like yourself, I like to make sure that the people coming on our courses are doing it for the right reason and it's the right course for them. And I will turn someone away if I think it's the wrong course for them.
What first inspired you to write your own training? When did that come about?
So I was a teacher trainer for Peak Pilates in the UK, and their education program is amazing. Their manuals are amazing, and they had a really, really great mentorship program. So I was mentored by Claire Dunphy over in the States, and she's an amazing educator, really, really great educator, probably one of the best educators I've experienced. At the time, I started working with Jay, and what Jay was saying wasn't quite aligning with what they were doing at the time. And I really struggled because, I loved kind of like having that focus of being the teacher trainer, but I loved what Jay was saying and saying at the same time. And the feeling of what Jay was teaching me was started to overtake what I was presenting elsewhere. So we started to create our own program at that point. And we've always grown our studios by training our own teachers. So everybody in our studios is trained by me and my teacher trainers. So we started to kind of build this kind of program around the need for consistency within our studios and consistency from what I was learning from Jay.
And how is your teacher training program structured? Is it a comprehensive? Do you do it modularly? How does it work?
It's progressed, it's developed over time. We do run a level 3 mat work qualification. We run it as a classical program, but we've also felt it was really important for our business to have that kind of auditing and quality assurance program behind us. We run the level 3 mat work. We also then run a comprehensive program, which is a 12 to 18 month program once you get all the way through. But you can take that modularly. So you can do like the beginner system, and then within a year take the intermediate system, within another year take the advanced system. We've kind of listened to people and listening to what they need from their teacher training. I know when I went through my comprehensive, it was every Sunday, it was like 6-7 hours in a studio practicing. And, the exhaustion level of like trying to get that done was, it was challenging. But what we've also done is we've introduced a fundamentals weekend, which is our very, very first weekend in our mat work and our comprehensive. So we've introduced this fundamentals, which introduces the very, very beginner reformer, beginner tower, and beginner mat. And you learn that little system from the very first weekend. Then if people want to go off into their mat work, they can go into their mat work qualification. If they want to go and progress onto the comprehensive, we're taking people through to the comprehensive that way. So we kind of felt that having that little bit of understanding of the reformer, the tower, and the mat together to start with was a really nice way for people to make an informed choice about which direction they wanted their training to go into.
I love that. It makes so much sense to give them that intro before they make that commitment. What kind of transformations do you see in your students? You've already mentioned you have people coming who are super experienced. I imagine you also have people coming, this is their first kind of movement into Pilates. What stories do you hear? I love the change that people see from learning this work in their own self is just amazing.
Having had a studio and regular customers for over sort of, 15 to 20 years, I have the same customers from then to now. And I think it's the body changes, not always, immediate, but over time that we experience that is so inspiring as well. So, we've seen, well, and myself, people have their children and they've started Pilates with us before and they've now come back and they're continuing their journey and the body changes they've experienced there. We've had, our older customers go from, being advanced practitioners in their mat work to now needing more support. Now they're entering towards their 80s and actually they just need some a good regular practice to keep themselves mobile and strong. So you have this kind of a lifetime of seeing them start their journey, travel through certain stages of their life, and then at each stage require different parts of the system to support them. And I think that's the best thing. I have a wonderful lady who's in her 80s. And I forget her age because I don't never ask age for when people come in, because I feel like if you're moving well and you're connecting well in your body, what does it matter? But I think she's 87. I think she is. And she comes in twice a week for 2 half-hour sessions. And we work on making sure that she can walk, build strength in walking, make sure she's, can walk without her stick, make sure that we can, go to the shops, carry her bags, do all the things that we take, for granted that actually make a difference to her life.
For me, it's some of those stories that drive me forward with my studios. If you want to come for the aesthetics, fine, crack on. You hear stories like that. People just, this work helping them live a life as full as is possible. And I just think that's amazing. Like, it's amazing how really what is quite simple, there's nothing to, of course there's depth to it. There's a lot of training that's needed. I'm not saying that, but I remember when I first qualified and my first studio's in an osteopath practice. So I got some really complex rehab people who were saying like, I've seen all these specialists. I've been seeing the osteopath for years. Here, they've sent me to you. Here I am. And then they would tell me, these stories of how well they'd feel. And I was like, I don't really think I'm doing anything too amazing with you. I'm just basically following the system, actually. Because I was so new, I didn't really have enough knowledge really to go off the system. I was like, I'll just follow what I've been taught. And it's amazing how it works.
Absolutely. And I think new instructors coming into the industry, you often get, you're never going to get a normal healthy person to come to class, are you, on your first outing? It's always going to be, okay, I've had a back problem, I might have had back surgery, I've got a shoulder problem, I've got a neck problem, a hip problem, and you're going to get that in your first couple of months of teaching. And it's how you tackle that and it's how you approach it that's going to make the difference in terms of whether you become one of those teachers that people are going to come back to because you just make them feel good and you get their body stronger, or whether that's going to be so unnerving for you that that's not the clientele that you want to work with, and you'll go into a different avenue and different way of teaching.
Do you sort of hear stories of people who are teachers on your course who maybe share challenges they have? They leave a course and the challenges they have going into the real world?
Yeah, I think we set them up really well. I think we really reinforce how to get people connected in their bodies so that they're never going to be stuck for going back to the basics. We reinforce that actually the basics is where you need to be in every exercise. So if you do have somebody come in with, in severe pain, then obviously if it's beyond your remit, then you're just going to send them away and you're not going to take them on as a customer. But if you can make them move pain-free and gain a little bit of understanding about their bodies, then that customer is going to be happy and they're going to come back. So I would say there are always questions on our courses. What am I going to do with this person? What's going to happen in this situation? But I feel that if we keep bringing them back to understanding the basics of the system and the basics of what they're doing, then they build confidence in using Pilates as it should be to help these people.
You have multiple studio locations. What drove you from your first location to opening the second and the third?
Insanity? I don't know.
Because they're not that
People,
close to each
friends.
other, some of them. Some of them are a
Yeah, I
little
know.
further.
Yeah, I know. I know. Where did we start? So Southsea is my home studio. That's where I live. We always wanted to look at opening another studio, and our Lockheath studio is sort of a 25-minute drive away from us here. And that was our second studio. We had customers who were interested in training. They were moving out that way. So we explored the option of opening a studio. And that's kind of how that one came up. And then we have a studio in the Netherlands, of course. And that was a franchise to start with. So one of our customers in Portsmouth went to work out in the Netherlands at the same time as like transitioning from one job to coming out. She was interested in opening a studio and said that she'd love the support of us to help her. So we opened a franchise. Since then, she stepped back from the business and we've then taken it back over and we run it as one of our own studios now. So it's definitely people. It's definitely people that make me open new studios. And our Windsor one opened last year. And again, one of our instructors who has done our courses, our master's courses, wanted to open a bigger studio. So we worked with her to open a studio in Windsor and her client base kind of came into the business and then she moved away. So we run that studio again with a nice small group of teachers that we've trained.
Is that how one of my questions was going to be, how do you keep the ethos and the standards throughout those locations? Because, you can't be popping in all the time. They're not that close to you. Do you feel like that comes from the training?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes from making sure that our teachers are in contact with us, that we provide them a really good structure through our education, that they understand what it is required of them in our studios, how we think that should look, and kind of that support network and what we want people to feel when they have their sessions, how we want them to walk out and experience it.
How have you found the transition in your leadership style, from running one location where it's like, it's just you and you can just have these conversations? I'm asking this from myself. I've got 3 studios. Third one opened last year. They're all in my city. So I don't even have that big challenge of the locations, but I've definitely had to sit back and say, I can't keep doing things the same way. Did you have that?
Absolutely. There's definitely a place of not knowing where you belong anymore. I think when your business grows, you start to pass the elements of the business off to other people, into your employees. So, socials are going to be done by somebody else. Marketing plans going to be done by somebody else. Like, oh, we need more trainers. We need more trainers to come on board to roll out our education. It's going to be done by somebody else. So all of that information kind of gets funneled in and then you're kind of popped on top, aren't you, essentially? And you're supposed to know everything, but now it's difficult because you can't get involved in everything.
How do you spread your time with all of those? Because it sounds great, doesn't it? Like, have an org chart, like you said. I've got educators, I've got, lead instructors, I've got a manager, but they all still have questions. And I think the thing that I've realized in the last year or so, especially, is that actually, in a really nice way, the business of Pilates is quite complex in that we're dealing with real people with real needs. And so it's great to have standing operating procedures, but it never fulfills everything. So there's always a lot of stuff that, like you said, comes back up the funnel to you. And then making sure that where people do have autonomy, that they're doing it as good or as close to as good as you would do it, or ideally better. I'm all into people doing it better. But I'm really interested how you've managed that around those locations.
I think that's the key. I think you need to find people that are going to do it better than you ever would. I think you give them space to be able to do that and take it on as their own. And I will always say that all of our studios have different personalities. So all dependent on the instructors that are working there, all of our studios require certain things that are different. So it's really, really easy for me to say, right, let's have a management meeting and work on the same thing, but everybody will have a different idea in terms of, what their customers like or how their customers will react to a certain suggestion. The consistent part is the Pilates. The consistent part is, well, we teach it like this, so that this is the way it goes and we can't really go wrong with that. It's the people management that is the tough part. It's that's the challenge. It's that's it's those times when your teachers are tired and they need a break and they haven't had a holiday, and you need to be able to manage that. You need to go, you need a day off. Can you go and have a day off, please? Have you booked your holiday this year? When was the last time you booked a holiday? It's recognizing when when you need to look after your teachers just as much as your customers. Because if your teachers are not thriving, then your business isn't going to be thriving either.
Are your studio managers teachers as well, or are they a separate entity?
They're a combo.
A combo. So
Yeah,
therefore
they're a combo.
they're bought into this ethos, they're in it, they're with, they're with you on that.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
think that probably helps.
absolutely.
I was talking to the owner of Platinum Pilates last week in an episode. She was explaining that actually some of the best team members have come from, they were clients, or,
Yeah.
they were clients who then did teaching, or they were clients who left their marketing job and did her marketing. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because the ethos can take some time to seep into someone who's completely brand new to this, and mistakes can be made. I've definitely found that quite tricky.
Yeah, I think brand awareness, when somebody is coming in to work for you for the first time, if somebody's already like invested in you as a brand, so a client or a former customer, they've got their heart and soul in it already, and they become very loyal to you. They want the brand to have success. I'm not sure about how many other studios out there kind of just run on freelance staff, but we employ our staff, and they're there for the full-time hours. So it's a little bit different in our studios, because I know that they're not coming in to teach class and then going away again. They're coming in for their set hours during that day. And I know that I've got them for either teaching classes, or I've got them for phone calls or admin, or can you go and hand some flyers out? Can you go and call one of our customers that we haven't seen for a few weeks, make sure they're okay? Can you pop around their house and take them some milk if they need it? All of our team work in such a way that we're there in it with each other the whole time.
Because I saw that your teams are relatively small in each studio, despite the fact you've got really big timetables, and that's because you've got them full time. I think I can definitely see the benefit of that. And also they're very much bought into the success of your studios, as opposed to trying to share, the studio's successes of lots of studios that they work at.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do feel like that's changing at the moment. I do feel like that the applicants that we're getting for jobs are now not looking for those types of roles. I feel like we're looking at more people that want freelance work, and that comes with more studios opening, doesn't it? It comes with availability of work. That's slightly changing at the moment. So when we're looking for employing people, we're looking at slightly different things that we're looking for in people, rather than kind of that freelance position.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess when you're opening like a brand new studio and you're like, right, here are all the hours, let's divvy them up. This is yours, this is yours, this is yours. But then as things grow and you're like, well, now I'd like someone on a Sunday, you have to kind of try and get someone who just does a Sunday, or which is a new challenge. So tell me about where you see the future of this going with your work. What's coming next for Everybody Pilates?
So we are investing in more in our education, because I think that's really important. I think with the influx of people that are starting to take reformer courses and the demand for instructors, we are expanding on our education. The hope is that we're also going to be expanding our studios. So we will be looking to open a few more studios, but also to make sure that what we're delivering stays consistent. We're going to see a lot of trends. We are seeing a lot of trends. I think as an industry, we're sitting back and seeing how long this is going to, like, how far it's going to go, how, who's going to be opening the big reformer studios in the UK, who's going to develop those, what are the big brand name gyms that are going to be opening, and how is that actually going to impact the business. Until that happens, I think we're all waiting patiently. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing. There's a middle ground. I think promoting Pilates to a wider audience, Joseph Pilates said he wanted everybody doing his method. Promoting Pilates to the wider audience is one of those messages. How we support the teachers through their education is the next step.
And with the education, do you feel any pressure to modernize with the sort of trends that are out there at the moment? Or does that make you feel even closer to your origins?
So I talk about this on our sort of master's course, is that the gap between classical and contemporary if you go through the classical work, you go through the beginner, the intermediate, the advanced, you get to your super advanced exercises. You take a look at some of the contemporary exercises and you go, oh, that's not too different to what that super advanced exercise is. And I often think it's that In classical, we would build you up, make sure you were really, really, really strong, and then we'd throw that exercise at you. So right at that end, where the grey part, where it's like, is that a classical exercise? Is it a contemporary exercise? I think that gap is there, but it's closer than we think it is. So what I'm kind of interested in is like taking those contemporary exercises and going, well, where's its classical root? Where is the classical exercise within this? And is it appropriate to do it on the reformer? Is it appropriate to do it standing on a box on a reformer? Is it appropriate to do it standing up, sitting down, lying down? You know, all of those options. And I think it's just conversations that we have to have. In terms of, is it appropriate? I would say if you have, you know, somebody walk into your studio and that variation pops into your head and it works for that person and it provides with them some benefit for the workout, then it probably is appropriate in that moment, in that teaching position for that person. Maybe I wouldn't teach it to a whole group in one go, but it might be something that I would teach to somebody if that variation was appropriate for them.
Yeah. And I think, as you said as well, it's that, how do you build them up to it? This is the piece sometimes I see when I go to certain studios, that I don't feel like they're building people up to stuff. And they're throwing these really quite complex movements in very early, adding weights, kettlebells, light springs, heavy springs. And it's not that the move itself is wrong to be taught. It's just that, have you definitely helped that person understand it? Because that's what changed my body. It changed my understanding of my body. It allowed me to, instead of meeting an edge that I felt like, I'm not good enough, I can't do that, look, here I go again, and have that narrative in my head, I had a teacher who taught me the bits and pieces that got me there, and then went, right, let's, look at that. I often talk to our students about sometimes planning a class backwards, being like, well, where are you taking them? What are your big moves and what are the components of that? And put that into your plan so that even in a one class, you've taken them onto a journey that's going to get them there and give them the best chance of success with that. And then I go to another studio and that might be the second exercise in the class. It's not that the exercise is wrong, but I think there is sometimes a missing piece around the origins, like you said, of these moves and how we can help people get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jay and Mijo have always instilled in me, you stay in the intermediate system for a long time. Yeah, you get through your beginners exercises and you stay in that intermediate system for a long time. Where you build your strength up is in the intermediate system. Because when you want to introduce the snake and twist for somebody for the first time, you want them to be successful at it. You want to know that you've given them enough strength, you've used all the appropriate exercises in the system to be able for them to get onto that exercise the very first time and be successful at it. And not to be able to not even step up on the reformer or have to modify it in any way. The advanced exercises shouldn't have to be modified because you've built people up along the way to be successful when they first try it.
That's so interesting about that intermediate section. That makes absolute sense to me. And it makes sense in my own journey. It makes sense in how I teach my clients. And I think there's so much juice in that work, around how we get the body moving better, more integration, more awareness, and the strength, as you said. Amy, how do you balance the education program and the thinking that goes in with that and supporting those students and your educators, but also with running the studios? Because I know that's a challenge that I have. I want some space around me to be like, okay, let's write a new course. What's needed? How am I going to put something out into the world that's going to help people do something that's going to make a change? How do you manage that with family, with the studios, with the people? How do you manage to do that?
I've got some really good managers in our studios. I've got some great managers that, lead by example. And I know that they take everything on board with the studios. They're much better than running studios than I am. So the everyday running is down to them. I'm just there to provide a little bit of advice if they need it. So in terms of that, I've got a great team of managers. So really, I don't have to get involved with the day-to-day. I still teach, all my customers as per usual and my classes as per usual. And then I try to find the time to structure the education, but because it's been structured for such a long time, I always say that like running courses is the easiest part of my job. It's the part that's the most enjoyable, and it's the part where we see progress so well. So I always think actually running courses is like my breath of fresh air for me. It takes all my stress away.
I know, I absolutely love running our training weekends. I just get to go deep and talk about this stuff all weekend long. You said you've got other people helping run those courses now, is that right?
Yes, so we've developed a team of trainers now. So I've got Kerry and Anna, and I've got Afka in the States, in the Netherlands, that are running courses for us. So they're starting to take over like the mat work courses and the fundamentals. And now I'm focusing on the comprehensive program and our master's program.
Do you have a dedicated studio for your teacher trainings, or does that run alongside the classes and things that you run?
Yeah, it runs alongside the classes. We try and run courses in each of our studios. So in Maastricht, we run courses. Afka heads up those. I've just been in Windsor running courses this past weekend. We have our courses running in Southsea, and then we'll use the Loxheath studio as well to run courses as well. We do online training. We have a few studios which we will run virtual courses with, and we have a sort of like a nice network of people that we do that for.
So you've really gone far and wide with this. I mean, even within
We're
those
going
studios,
big.
yeah, very big and busy. It sounds like there's trainings, I mean, literally running round the clock.
Yeah, it feels like it at the moment. It feels like it. I think we've run maybe 8 or 9 fundamentals weekends this year around each of the studios, which is great. We have a full comprehensive running at the moment. We have a full master's program running at the moment. Another mat work course starting in September. So it's starting to really, really take hold and build a community of people that are that are all kind of on the same page and want to learn in the same way, which is amazing.
I love that. And I love the idea that those like foundations weekends sound a really great introduction actually to the full system.
It's interesting because I always invite our like past comprehensive trainees and our master's programs trainees to observe any of our sessions. And I have one trainer who came at the weekend, and it was the first weekend I'd met these trainees. Some of them, they've obviously been doing Pilates before, but they haven't been doing it in our way, and they were discovering new connections. The teacher that was observing sort of turned around and said, "Are they teachers already?" And I was like, "No, this is their first weekend." She was like, "Oh, because they look different to like the other course that I observed with you." And I was like, "Well, what do you think is different?" She's like, "Well, I think with every course that you're running, you're becoming so much more precise about what you want from the exercises and how you want people to move. And it's becoming so much more about like the feeling and the work." And she said, "I think it's just that you're getting better and better at delivering that content in a way that you want it delivered." So it's really important that we continue to find our own voices as trainers, that we continue to find, the things that make us passionate about Pilates, that we want to share, and we want to make sure that people are taking with them to teach their customers.
How do you do that? How do you continue to stay inspired and continue, getting clearer on what your message is?
I think it's working with my trainers, making sure that we're all working on the same thing. It's taking lessons with my trainers. It's working on my own body, discovering the new things that I need to work on. It's being inspired by other trainers as well. We've got Mijo coming over next month. We've got Brooke coming in September. We've got Sanjay coming next year. That's where I'll get my inspiration from. But also, I really love my master's program because I get to work with people that have been teaching for a long time, and the questions that they bring to the table challenge me and make me think and make me kind of need to go away and think about it and, come up with finding something new or reinforcing what I already know. So I think it's working with a lot of people, just keeping the excitement about what's happening in people's bodies, how to discover new things.
I think it's really nice for people to hear that, because people come out newly qualified first few years and can feel like, I don't know all this stuff. Like none of us know all this stuff. We're always posed with questions, aren't we? That we're like, don't know the answer to that, but let me go and think about it.
And I think that's, we're never, as a teacher trainer, I'm not going to have all the answers. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to say I don't know. And maybe we can ask someone else in the room who does have a better depth of knowledge of a certain subject or have experienced something in their body before that we might not have. And I think you've got to be able to listen to those around you that have got that advice and that knowledge and use it. Otherwise, you're not going to be the best teacher that you can be.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we instill in all students that just continue learning, whether that's through courses, but also, like you said, through your peers, and just being open and curious, because not everything, like I think sometimes as a teacher, we've become what landed well for us. You could have gone and worked with somebody else and it, like, even you said when you first met Jay, like it just didn't land with you. It wasn't the right time. But that's just as useful, isn't it? To be like, well, why? I try and instill in my students, like, just be curious, like ask why. Why have they said it like this? Why does it feel like this? Why do I think I wouldn't really do this? But you ask the question and decide it in your own body and see what it feels like. And sometimes that's as much information, isn't it? For you to go, you might work with a teacher and you just don't resonate with them, and that's fine. And then just go and look at other things.
Absolutely. I think one of the best sessions that I teach is when somebody comes to me and has a lesson and I'm like, who taught you that? And they're like, why? I was like, because I want to understand what they were trying to get you to do. So they'll be like, well, I went to this teacher and they've taught me that I need to keep my legs straight in this exercise. So I'm going to keep my legs straight. And then I get the opportunity to ask why. And I'm like, well, why did they ask you to do that? And the answer sometimes is, well, I don't know. They just made me straighten my legs. I'm like, but where's it coming from? Where's the straightening of the leg coming from? Where are you feeling that? Like at the moment, it's not, their movement pattern might not be working effectively for them because they're just thinking about their legs because that's what that teacher told them to do. But actually, I get to do all the juicy bits afterwards and go, well, what if you think about the leg straightening from these muscles or connecting in this way to get those legs to straighten, and see if we can make it even better than, somebody previously taught you, and get you to understand it a little bit more. And I like kind of like dissecting it in that way and kind of making people go, oh, okay, yes, I get it. I get why that person made me do it that way. Rather than being stuck in I'm being made to do it this way, but I don't know why and I can't feel it.
Absolutely. Or like it's a script. Like I must say this, but I don't have any idea why I say this. And therefore I don't know why I say it, then I can't necessarily notice what my client is doing. And maybe I'm saying something that they're already doing anyway. And it goes back to actually what you said earlier about Jay, getting people to feel, and Joe as well, getting them to feel it in their bodies and notice. And our cueing is such an important part of that. We have to kind of understand the why, but it takes time, doesn't it? It takes time in our own journey. There are definite things that, you're like, I've just learnt the script of this. But that's why we encourage our students to go deeper with this and to always be curious and keep learning.
Absolutely. And you've got to start somewhere, right? You've got to be able to learn where your hand goes and where the foot goes. And if that's the part of learning that you're currently in, then that's fine. That's fine. If it's going to take you 6 months to understand where to put your hands and legs and remember where your springs go and all of that, then do that. And then in 6 months' time, you might be able to find something a little bit deeper. And then in 6 years' time, you're going to find something else about the same exercise. And that's the beauty of kind of allowing people to be where they are in their training and understanding.
It's like with our clients though, isn't it? Like a beginner often needs quite a simple, straightforward framework. And then as someone is more experienced, you can be like, how would it be if you did this? What would it be like if you did this? If you said that to a beginner, it's just going to blow their mind. They're like, no, just tell me where my hands and feet go and what I do. And I guess it's the same. What you're saying is it's the same as a teacher. You come out even qualified, you're a beginner teacher. You might have your qualification, but you're still a beginner teacher. You're still figuring this stuff out. And as time goes on, you have your experiences. You just get deeper with your knowledge as well. To finish our conversation of today, I'd just like to ask you a couple of quick fire questions if I can, Amy. So what was the most influential piece of advice you've been given, and by who?
Jay told me to sparkle more.
What did he mean by that?
I have no idea.
Are you still trying?
I am still trying. I went away and I tried to internally sparkle for 3 months. and like went back to see him, and he'd completely forgotten what he'd said. But it was the most important thing I think that anybody's ever said to me, that, you know, he told me in one moment to like, you know, sparkle more, and it stuck with me. And that influenced the way that I kind of dealt with my next 3 months of my practice, my teaching and everything. And I'll always take that away with me.
And what mentors have shaped your life?
Jay, definitely. He's had the biggest kind of influence on me, I would say, emotionally and, you know, physically, in terms of the way that I teach and approach people. Mijo has had the biggest impact on my energy in teaching. And originally Claire Dunphy had a really big impact on the way that I view education.
And if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would that be?
That it's okay to just hold space for yourself and for those around you.
And what has been the most profound gift from Pilates?
I think just the ability to be present with people. I think the ability to listen to people and to be able to understand that we just give each other time and space.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. If people want to work with you, I'll put it on the show notes, but I'm guessing they just go to your website and they can see there is a plethora of options on there.
There are. If you want to get direct to me, I don't tend to put my schedule up, so you'll have to hunt a little bit more.
Thank you so much for your time today. It really has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Nick.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I'm really grateful that you're here, and I'm loving building this community with you all. Make sure you click the follow button so you don't miss an episode. New ones come out every Monday. And if you found today's content helpful, it would mean a lot if you left a 5-star review, or even better, shared it with someone you think would enjoy it too. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next week.